Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise. Stop, listen, share. Everyone can make a difference. We are on a mission. Everyone should do something greater in their lifetime. Change the future. Be a proud member. Join us to support, volunteer, and donate.
Welcome to Stop Now. I'm JK, and we are quite excited to have our special guest today. And I have been joined by Jason, my co-host, here as well.
Well, welcome to Stop Now, guys. I'm Yuichi and Bita. I'd like to welcome you to Stop Now. How are things going?
Okay, very good. Yeah, thank you for welcoming us.
Could you introduce the both of yourselves, Yuichi and Bita?
Thank you for having us. I'm very great to be here. I'm Yuichi Asakura. I was born and raised in Japan. For some reason, I encountered Buddhism when I was 20 years old, after having a rough time in my teenage days. And then the topic of Buddhism immediately fascinated me. That was my beginning of spiritual journey. And now, after 30 more years of learning, now on the way, I met Bita and joined force. Now sharing Buddhism in the United States. We started in California, but now I'd like to share Buddhism with more people and people from all over this country. This is what I'm doing these days with Bita and I are doing. Thank you for having us today.
Mm-hmm. And Bita, where are you from?
Okay, so yeah, I'm Iranian American, and I found Buddhism when I was a student at UCLA in Los Angeles State University. And yeah, so being an immigrant, I was going through a kind of an identity crisis or some kind of spiritual turmoil. Suddenly I felt like I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. That's when I was in my 20s, and I felt very lost. And you know, the good thing is about American universities, you can study anything you want, you can be anything you want. Maybe too many options, so it was like so difficult to narrow it down to one path. And yeah, so right around that time, Buddhism came to my life. And when I learned about it, I realized how important it was that I did feel lost so that I could find myself. So I found myself through Buddhism. And but it took some time. I went to Japan to learn Buddhism. I lived there altogether for 8 years. That's how I met Yuichi. And after I studied for 10, 20 years, I felt like I knew enough to be able to share with others. And I don't know if I'm an empath or something along those lines. I'm very sensitive to the suffering in the world, so I would be easily influenced. And Buddhism has helped me kind of understand the situations, why things happen the way they do. And so it's a pleasure now to be able to give back to the community.
Wonderful. And to introduce us, because one thing that I like about this program is we come from completely different backgrounds. And in our conversations, hopefully our conversations are rather candid. We are honest, even sometimes brutally honest, because our goal on this podcast isn't necessarily to agree, but it's to learn from each other. It's to find interesting things about each other and to learn from each other, to gain a different perspective, to add to our broader portrait of how the world looks, to fill in the puzzle pieces, as it were. So I'm originally from the United States, originally from Nebraska. I grew up nominally Christian at best, basically church occasionally on Christmas Eve to satisfy my grandparents. But that dwindled. I was never that fervent of a believer, if I ever was. And I discovered secular humanism, and it was the best descriptor of how I saw the world to be. On top of that, much like I assume we'll talk about this, because how I think a great way to have this conversation go is to illustrate what Buddhism is, talk about your guys' personal stories and how you found Buddhism, where you were before you got engaged in Buddhism, and then afterwards explore the different aspects of Buddhism. For example, how does the Eightfold Path, how can that influence other people's lives? What is it? Can you be a Buddhist and a Christian, a Buddhist and a Muslim? Can you be a Buddhist and an atheist? Which I know the answer is yes. And then additionally, I think there's some difficult questions that I think will be really interesting, such as, is the concept of nirvana fatalistic? Does it drive us to do good things or only do enough to enter a realm of non-existence, to escape samsara? And then other little questions in this conversation of when Americans think of Buddhism, why do they always think of the Buddha instead of the Buddha? Because when you see the Buddha, well, maybe it's because Americans generally are overweight, so that's the Buddhism, the Buddha that they tend to see themselves in, with little friendly waving cat. But yeah, I got into secular humanism, and initially I was deeply angry at religion, even though I didn't come from religion, because I'm thinking about certain obstacles. And I went, and in my university experience, I went later in one of my bachelor's degrees, I have two of them, is in religious studies. I'm deeply interested about religion. I see religion less as a matter of belief and more of a social enterprise. And I see religion as a lens which we can help see and understand other people through their worldviews. So that's who I am. That's where I'm coming from, as a secular humanist.
And as Jason mentioned that, like, I grew up with complete freedom from my parents, where I never believed in God. So my understanding of Buddha is like everyone has the potential to be a Buddha. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's why like we have invited you both who are doing good work on that. And I just have many questions, but taking into account the time limitations we all have, I'll kickstart, if you don't mind, Jason. Like the first question is, the topic of the discussion is like, is Buddhism a religion or philosophy?
Yeah, in my opinion, Buddhism is explained as sometimes religion, but some people describe it as philosophy, some people psychology, and some people education. And I think all are right. In a sense, Buddhism teaches us the way of life, and everybody, regardless of their value, core value, they will be able to achieve happiness that doesn't fade away, that doesn't crumble, happiness that doesn't betray us. This is our goal, the goal of Buddhism. And in order to achieve this, Buddha went very deep. And then, I think some of us know the concept of reincarnation. So when we talk about this kind of topic, might sound religious, but reincarnation or past life or future life, people think this is religious, but it is just that it cannot be proved by science, and that's all. But in deep down, if we have self-consciousness and instinct, some people easily accept reincarnation, even though they don't care if it sounds religious or not. They just feel it might be true, even though it's not proven by any experiment or speculation or observation. Something we can feel by instinct. And also Buddhas teach wisdom, especially those those which are written in Dhammapada sound very deep, philosophically deep, and it touches everybody's heart. In my middle school days, I became friend with a missionary of Mormonism because those missionaries lived very close to my parents' house. I was 12 years old. Because I'm very much interested in learning English, I thought this was a great opportunity. And then I visited their apartment house, played backgammon, and ate donuts together. And then I was invited to their church. Yeah. And then I watched some slideshow, which is about the history of Mormonism. It was very boring. I fell asleep. But anyway, after many months, I thought, okay, I'm ready to convert. I'm going to become a Mormonist. And then the missionaries came to my house and talked to my parents with their English, very primary school level Japanese. They spoke to my parents. At that moment, I gave a second thought. Am I going to be a Mormonist? Is it okay? And I gave up the idea. Do you know why I gave up this idea? It's so kind of foolish, or how do I say? It's not very miscellaneous reason. I gave up because Mormonism prohibits drinking coffee and smoking and so on. I thought that's too much. I want to drink coffee, and I want to smoke maybe in the future. So they didn't explain why these are bad. Buddhism, in some schools of Buddhism, they teach asceticism, and there's a reason. There's a good reason to do that. Yeah, we need to think about happiness and desire. What's the relationship? So in this sense, Buddhism is very practical. So I think it will benefit anybody. So that's how what people can learn from Buddhism. So regardless of religion or faith, anybody can benefit from Buddha's wisdom. That's my answer. Became a little too long.
So what religious tradition did you start off with before you considered converting to Latter-day Saints and then became Buddhist?
I didn't have any religious background because in most Japanese parents are kind of atheist, but they belong to Buddhist temple, and they go to Shinto shrine as a culture, and they do funeral ceremony and wedding ceremony with Buddhist style, and that's all. They don't practice much in their day-to-day life. So as a result, I didn't have any religious background. I didn't know anything about God and Buddha. Just believe that there must be some supernatural being. That's all I had.
So do you think it was easier to convert to Buddhism because of the cultural endorsement of Shinto and Buddhist practices than it would have been to convert to Mormonism? Do you think that your upbringing laid a foundation that it was more a homecoming for you, as it were?
Yeah, I think so. Because in Japan, Buddhism is immersed in their culture, language, and geography. Even some names of town, mountain, even waterfall has names that are related to Buddhism. So in that sense, all Japanese Buddhism is embedded in their blood and soul, maybe.
So then that leads me to ask Bita, Presumably you grew up either Zoroastrian, Baha'i, or Muslim. While Yuichi had the cultural Buddhist foundation that was underlying his experience growing up. What was your experience growing up? And you talked about college. What led you to Buddhism? And what challenges did you overcome or work through? Or were there challenges to work through to becoming a Buddhist, considering where you've come from? Additionally, with your family, Yuichi brought up his family and funerals, etc. With your family, have there been any obstacles, challenges? Was there acceptance?
Okay, yeah, those are very good questions. Yeah, my family also, like Yuichi's family, was not religious. So they were very open, which is, I think most people are like that. They just grow up if they were not taken to a church or somewhere by their parents. So I had the privilege of always thinking for myself, you know. Yeah, so I always thought about why people suffer. I'm very sensitive to people's anger. So if someone expressed their anger or irritation at something when I was little, even if it was not directed at me, like it always affected me negatively. So I had to think about why people just feel so much frustration in life. Why do they have to vent? So this was always in my heart. And yeah, I never found very convincing answers for it until I had a chance to study Buddhism in Los Angeles. And yeah, so the challenges of becoming a Buddhist, this is like 20 some years ago. So Buddhism was not as popular as it is today. And, or maybe because I was new, I didn't have enough access to books on Buddhism. So yeah, I had to, my teacher of Buddhism, he was from Japan, and he had actually an interpreter, a bilingual Japanese English kind of student at UCLA who was translating for us. So that's how I learned Buddhism. So I was very grateful that, you know, they spent so much time and energy to convey Buddhism in America in English, even though they themselves spoke Japanese. And so that motivated me to learn Japanese. So yeah, and actually learning Japanese was fascinating because these Chinese characters, they can be very deep. So I was like, wow, like it takes you to a whole new world. You know, if I give you an example, it's like we write person in English, Person, but in Chinese or Japanese, they use pictograms, you know, something like a picture. So it's like two sticks or two segments leaning on each other. This is what a person is, you know, it's like this, it's a character. And it's like, I was so fascinated because I was trying to, you know, like find happiness all by myself, succeed in life all by myself. And then I realized how, you know, conceited of me to think that way, because human being is someone who needs each other for support and growth. And so this is why I went to Japan and learned. So the challenges were mostly language, because it's a very difficult language actually to learn. And yeah, just living in a foreign country all by myself until I met Yuichi.
So you guys are bringing up aspects of happiness and suffering. So this leads back to the central question of what is Buddhism? And as the both of you are mentioning the practical applications of Buddhism, what is Buddhism? What is it seeking to achieve? And how do you operate within Buddhism? Essentially, the question going back to suffering, discontent, happiness. What is Buddhism, and why are people Buddhist? What is the end goal?
Yeah, Yuichi, before you answer that, like I just wanted to add to that question what Jason mentioned. So it's like you said, like just like taking the middle path, like you don't want to offend anyone, saying that like, okay, you can call it as religion, you can call it as education, you can call it as philosophy. you kind of embedded everything into it. So the point is like, how did it become religious? All right, because it is more prone towards atheism, right? From my understanding, like Buddha rejected everything And though he comes from the Hindu tradition, and Indian country has a whole lot of cultures and languages as such. So why is it important to be religious? Like I feel like offensive, like to take the concept of Buddhism to religion, because the religions are kind of in a way extremism, right? Any religion for that matter. How did historically even Buddhism become a religion?
So if it's all about how to become successful, how to be happier, we have a lot of knowledge or information already in this day of information overload. If you just Google, and Google teacher share a lot of information, a lot of YouTube video, we can learn a lot how to improve our lifestyle. There are so much lecture and advice already. But I have to say there are a few differences between those self-help teaching and Buddha's wisdom. And if I emphasize that part, I think I may sound a little religious. That difference is impermanence of life or the impermanence of world, which means we have to grow older and older. It's aging, and eventually everybody gets sick and illness. This is Buddha taught us suffering of sickness, and then we are all mortal. So no matter how wealthy, how high status we might acquire, nobody can avoid those reality of impermanence. And when we are confronted with this reality, I think anybody can be very spiritual. And at that moment, we seek for the true answer. I mean, ultimate answer. How can I overcome these big hurdles? And Buddha gave a very exact answer, because that was the very motivation for Siddhartha to start walking on the spiritual journey. And he, at the age of 35, he got the answer, and then he became a Buddha, and now we have his wisdom. So Buddhism teaches the process and the destination, both. How we can enjoy the process, how we can enjoy the journey, and how we can reach the destination, which is true happiness that doesn't fade away. Happiness that overrides all these three universal suffering. When we emphasize this, we become a little religious.
So that draws to mind a question. If it's a process, and I'm curious on this, looking at Eastern religions versus Western religions. If we look at the Western religions, it's incredibly important that Moses was a real person in order for the system to work. It's incredibly important. It's not just incredibly, it's vital that Jesus and Muhammad would have had to have been a real person, an individual, and had done the things that they had done and been involved in the manner in which they were involved for the system to work. With Buddhism, considering it's more of a process, and as you're saying, and as JK mentioned, anyone can become a Buddha, an enlightened person, is the existence of Siddhartha necessary? And how important is the first Buddha? I assume Siddhartha was the first Buddha. How important is the first Buddha? Is the process more important than the individual, the creator of the system?
So yeah, actually, let's say, because Buddha or Siddhartha, he was living in India 2,600 years ago. So let's say they come up with some kind of, I don't know, archaeology or some kind of history let's say they prove that Siddhartha never came to this world, like he never existed on this earth. So yeah, the happiness or enlightenment, the self introspection that we all go through in life until we reach enlightenment. So there is no change in that process. And those people who will be able to make it all the way to the goal, to the end goal of enlightenment, their enlightenment will not waver a bit or an ounce just because there is suddenly a news that, oh, you know, maybe Siddhartha never existed in India or was never born in Nepal or whatever. Yeah. So that has nothing to do with the process or the realizations or discoveries that individuals will have based on the work they do, the work of soul searching and introspection.
So that leads to another question. Are there Buddhists who see Siddhartha as a godlike figure? I mean, of course, there's the cosmic Buddhists. Are there those who see Buddha or the cosmic Buddhas as having an intercessory quality where they can intervene in the happenings of the world around us? And also, much like Christianity and Islam, there's different sects of Buddhism, Theravedic Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism. So this leads to several questions. What are the different versions of Buddhism? And what distinguishes them? And what is the most commonly spread version of Buddhism?
Just to let everyone know that, like, we have another a special friend of ours. Like, he joined us. His name is Arumugam, and he wants to ask some questions as well. Like, so we are getting more audience as well. Welcome, Arumugam.
Yeah, hi.
Let me answer your question first. There's an episode about Siddhartha Gautama's birth. He was born in the Lumbini Garden, which is a beautiful garden or park in Nepal, because his mother was on her journey to her hometown to give a birth. But in the middle of the journey, the labor started. So the doctors and nurses prepared the makeshift bed in the nearby garden, which was Lumbini Garden. And it was April 8th. It was spring, so the whole garden was full of flowers. Now in Asian countries, April 8th is called Flower Festival. They celebrate Siddhartha Gautama's birth. And there is a legend about his birth. Upon his birth, Siddhartha Gautama started walking toward 4 directions, east, west, north, south, and pointing the sky and the ground with his both hands, and said, on above heaven and down below the earth, among all the sentient beings, only human beings have a noble, important mission. It is said, he said this. Of course, no babies can do that upon birth, so it's kind of legendary, but it conveys an important message of Buddhism. So all human beings have an important role or mission, an important undertaking, and everybody has this. So in this sense, all the lives are important and meaningful. So of course, which is achieving enlightenment in this world, in this life, and go to nirvana. So that's the mission of each individual, Buddha said. And I think it makes complete sense to me. And there are many schools of Buddhism. Yeah, 2 mainstream of Buddhism is Mahayana and Theravada. And even among Mahayana, there are even in Japan almost 10 schools, and each school has their own sects. So there are so many schools and sects. So difference is partly because Siddhartha Gautama gave a lot of lectures over the course of 45 years, and all the sermons are recorded down to scripture. And then the number exceeds more than, 7,000. There are more 7,000 scriptures. So which scriptures people focus, this creates the difference of schools of Buddhism. But of course, Siddhartha Gautama's message was one thing. Yeah, how to achieve enlightenment and go to nirvana. So he gave one important conclusion. So if you read those sutras, more than 7,000 sutras carefully, I think we can find out the core message of Siddhartha Gautama. So, but people insist, oh, I like this sutra more. I think this sutra is more important. And then that's why many schools of Buddhism were born.
So with the different sutras, since Siddhartha was a human being, are there any contradictions in them? Any different paths and directions he took where they would disagree with each other? And if that's the case, what are some of the more interesting disagreements within the sutras that would lead to 10 different sects in Japanese Mahayana Buddhism?
Thank you very much for your very good question. Let me mention one most controversial difference. So Buddha's teaching method was always the same, because he was guiding people to deeper level of spiritual awakening. He needed to cultivate people's mind with words. That was very difficult task even for Buddha. So how was he able to cultivate people's mind? The most effective method for him was just let people to do something and come to a certain realization. One example is one young woman gave a birth to a boy, and she was divorced. She was a single mother, so she was the only parent for the boy. The boy was beautiful, pretty baby, but this baby boy, unfortunately died. But she couldn't believe the boy died. So she was frantically asking people how to resuscitate the boy. But everybody instantly understood the boy is already dead. But she didn't believe the boy's death. So one person told her to visit Siddhartha Gautama. And then she visited him, and Gotama gave a guidance. Okay, I can resuscitate this boy, but there's one condition. Walk around the town and find a house where people never experienced death even once, and ask for a few poppy seeds. If you bring those poppy seeds, I will make this boy alive again. And then this woman walked around the houses of the town the one whole day, but all the house they said, oh, I lost my father last year, or I lost my grandfather 3 years ago. And she couldn't find any house where they haven't experienced any death. And then she got exhausted, and then she realized that death is inevitable in human life. That moment, he finally came to this very simple truth and went back to Siddhartha and apologized and showed deep remorse, and she herself became a disciple of Buddha. So I talked about desire a while ago, and this is part of our ego, and attachment is a big issue in Buddhism. So Buddha said, okay, I'm gonna let you learn something. So practice this, and then you will have some realization. Do it, and then you will achieve a certain enlightenment. In many sutras, Buddha taught in this way. So people who believe these sutras, they firmly believe they can achieve enlightenment once they can practice this to the fullest, 100%. So that's why many schools, Buddhist monks engage themselves in harsh and strict practices. But Buddha's purpose was a little different. Like this young woman in the story, Buddha's intention was to let people understand how desire and egos are deep-seated, and it's part of human nature. It's difficult to eliminate it. It's like falling leaves in autumn. No matter how hard you keep sweeping and sweeping all day long, leaves keep falling from the tree. The cleaning will never be done. So Buddha's intention was to let people to come to this realization. In this point, there are two sides. People who strongly believe in asceticism and people who believe in other way around.
That's wonderful, Yuichi. Thank you. I mean, Bita, question for you on that note, right? I do have some very hard questions, tough questions. I was a little bit hesitant, like not to ask those things, because from my viewpoint, I mean, Arumugam might agree. He also come from South India, and he's our jewel, right? So Indians are pride. If you take out Buddha, Buddhism falls out, right? And how did that, like historically, when we talk about it was rich in culture, and through one of the famous king, Buddhism flourished all over South Asia, and literally Chinese and Japanese hijacked from us. And how did that happen? Do you have any insight on that, or do you agree on it? Because now if you look at it, completely it has been eradicated from the Indian subcontinent. It's like, again, they just merged with the Hinduism. So how did that happen, and why did that happen?
Oh, okay. So actually, I haven't studied history that much, but from my own practice of Buddhism, more than 20 years, I can tell you that, those who study Buddhism, because they see their life gets transformed, the more they practice, the more transformation they experience. So it's very difficult to keep that joy to ourselves. Naturally, we want to share it. This is how Buddhism began to spread outside India, because naturally people just, try to talk about it. And I have a feeling that maybe Hinduism was so strong or deep-rooted culturally, it had been in India for so long that maybe some of those people did not welcome Buddhism. And yeah, so that's why Buddhism had to kind of travel outside India, and Chinese welcomed that there were translators who spoke both Chinese and the Indian language of the time. And so that's how Buddhism got translated. I don't know why you use the word hijacked. Maybe you're sounding funny. But yeah, it's out of the joy. And so in this way, Buddhism got conveyed through China, and then from China through the Korean Peninsula, it came to Japan. And I feel like from Japan, it's coming to the United States. So yeah, and India is very big, right? So the population is like maybe fifth or 1/6 of the world's population. So because of all the numbers, and also it shows once you already believe in something deeply, it's very difficult to kind of start looking for something different. If you don't question your parents' religion, if you just follow them. And I have a feeling that in India, like many Asian countries, children try to be very loyal to their parents. It's very different from America, where critical thinking is encouraged so much, and children move out of the house at the age of 18. So in India, so I think filial piety might be on a different dimension. So people just want to maintain that kind of so-called harmony or being in unity with family, so they don't challenge the ideas probably. But yeah, I haven't studied history. You can ask Yuval Harari or Robert Greene. He's a very good researcher. So.
Yeah, thank you for that note. I mean, there are many scholars and researchers, philosophers, they came into deep-rooted exploration on that domain. So I just wanted to take on from that point, right, to moving on to the question of the suffering is the noble truth, one of the four truths, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I just got so interested because of atheism is more aligned to Buddhism. So I am trying to explore like what it has to say. So when suffering is the ultimate truth and death is the reality, we have to accept that. What is the big deal of enlightenment? Why do we make a big mess, right? You just live and die, right? Why do you like care about anything? What is the logic in it, right? Because I get it, right? I'm just made of matter and I disappear, living for a few time. What is there to practice as such?
Yeah, I thought in the same way when I was teenager and in my 20s. So I think that's how people think, how we should enjoy life. Life is beautiful, life is pleasurable, and that's true. Why Buddha said life is suffering, that statement itself so negative and it gives us pain, people say. People don't like the word suffering. But, as we grow older, and I'm in my mid-50s, and then my life view has changed a lot after getting in my 50s. I didn't understand aging so much in my youth, but now I'm still in my 50s, but suffering of aging is a real problem these days, unfortunately. And I thought, what Buddha said is true. If we don't stay young forever, of course, we are young in heart. Yeah, we are eternally young in our hearts. This is true. Our heart will never grow old. Yeah. So even if we become in our 80s or 90s, in our heart, we are like a teenager, so to speak. Yeah, I'm not exaggerating. Our heart don't grow old. But definitely our physical body grows very old. This is the law of physics. Everything grows old. And then as a result, we suffer. And not only suffer, we anticipate future impermanence too. I'm young, relatively speaking. I can walk, I can run, I can still run, I can jump. But eventually, I won't be able to jump or run. And I know that. And of course, I'm resisting to this reality. So I have to work out. I know I need to work out more. But muscle is not the only thing. For example, we're going to lose teeth, important teeth. Yeah, this is another impermanence. So if you think about this, yeah, we can forget about this, yeah, and try to enjoy present moment. But that will create more suffering in the future. So we should be smart and wise. So yeah, the first one of the eightfold path is right view. Right view is very important. Right view is look at the world as it is, and look at our lives as it is, and look at ourselves as we are. And then if you practice right view, yeah, and I think a lot of Buddha's teachings naturally sink in.
Myself, like all the questions, Jason, we just lost him, like probably come back. Arumugam, if you have any questions, you can also ask. My question is like, what is karma and why is it like so important? Because some of the concepts, because of Buddha's background of Hinduism, like even with the sutras, right? There is an in-depth yoga sutras of Patanjali, who was before Buddha. Like they gave so much insight, and as such, they say that like those are West Eastern science kind of thing. So how does the karma got into this, and what is your like even Bita Yuichi, any one of you like can explore and explain that, like what it means to you?
So yeah, karma, it just means actions, but actions come in three varieties. So it can be actions of the body, that's what we are more familiar with, like I'm speaking now, moving my hands, that's kind of physical actions. But it could be actions of our speech, because we talk, so through our words or language, we are capable of hurting someone or uplifting them. And also the karma of the mind, our thoughts. So these three varieties of karma are very important. And Buddha taught a lot about karma because it's something that we don't have so much awareness of unless we are listening to Buddhism, meditating on these ideas. So without our awareness, it keeps just accumulating. It becomes a cycle. It's what today's psychologists call it as habits, the power of habits. So habits are things we don't, necessarily have awareness of. We just do them. Once it becomes the habit, we just do them. We don't think about them. We don't observe them. We are not very conscious of them. Now, if they're good habits, then more power to you. Just keep up with it, and more good things will happen to you. But the problem is we also have bad habits. All of us, we have bad habits. For example, maybe secretly we might dislike somebody at work, especially when like a junior coworker gets promoted before us. What kind of thoughts can come to our mind? And if we are not aware of them, these thoughts that are not very compassionate, that are not very loving or kind, they get more and more intensified. So as time passes, we might become a bitter person or very resentful. And then we're going to project it onto others. If we don't resolve like our anger or resentment, then we might vent at someone who's totally innocent, who has nothing to do with our issues. So that's why karma becomes very important, to kind of do self-reflection, to look back and ask ourselves, okay, I lost my temper. Why did that happen? I said something that hurt that person, and now I feel rotten myself. Why did that happen? What can I do to prevent it from happening again? So if we do self-reflection, which is one of the good deeds taught in Buddhism, we can shift the rotation of that cycle. Instead of making it a vicious cycle, it can go the other way and become a virtuous cycle. So we can build on good habits, and then more and more good things happen to us, and we will have more and more joyfulness at heart.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. So my next question is like, so then what is nirvana?
Nirvana is, in short, the world of happiness. And in this world, we don't have blind passions like which we all call ego. Everybody enjoy happiness, and everybody thinks about mutual happiness, because we don't have this desire, anger, and envy anymore. So that's the nirvana. Nirvana literally means blowing out. So what is blown out? Our ego, our blind passions, our desire, anger, and envy. People don't have this ego in nirvana. So that's the literal meaning of nirvana.
Wow, that's thank you, Yuichi. Like that's a new way of putting it. Like I haven't come across that. Really, I mean, my struggle is like if we don't have the desire and passion, right? The Western concept is like, though it is more of capitalism and materialism, it's like if you don't have that passion and ambition in your life, then you don't strive to achieve things, right? So how do you set the goal or target? So how do I define my life or trying to have a purpose or meaning, right? If I don't have that passion.
I want to add one thing. I didn't say this in my answer, but nirvana is somewhere we will go in the afterlife, not in this life. Siddhartha Gotama experienced nirvana in this life, but Buddha said, ordinary people like us won't reach nirvana in this life. So even for us Buddhists, while we are in this world, we all have these passions. After we die, yeah, we go to nirvana, but Buddha didn't emphasize afterlife so much. Instead, because we are more interested in happiness in this life, Buddha taught paradise in this world, on this earth. So Bita, can you share more about it?
Yeah. Okay, sure. Yeah, so in this world, we all have blind passions. Buddha taught us that all human beings are made of blind passions, such as desires, anger, or envy, or ignorance, that kind of trouble and torment us. So those blind passions will not go away as long as we have this body. So it will be with us. So that's why we will have our goals. We still have to go to work. We still have to have our family if we want to, or we still feel the necessity of connecting to other people. We need friendships. So all those things will remain unchanged. Yeah, but our view of life will transform. So instead of just setting goals that benefit me and me alone, like very greedy, in a greedy way, selfish way, we try to set goals that benefit me as I benefit other people. So that's because the practice is practice of compassion. We cannot go forward if we are just acting as our instinct tells us, just protect myself, preservation. We cannot go forward with that mindset. So the path is a path of benefiting myself by benefiting other people. So how can we bring more joyfulness to other people around us? Everybody is struggling, is fighting with something. How can we bring joy to them? So the goals we have in life will be more like that, instead of just making all the money and becoming number one person in this or that, which means nothing when it's time for us to go. Who wishes that they had made more money? There's no such person.
Thank you for that. So before we wrap up, I just have 2 more questions. Armugam, if you want to jump in, ask any questions, let me know, feel free. And
yeah, JK, I have a few questions actually. Sorry if I can ask now. Is it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. I was actually listening to the conversation. It's really good. Like you already asked most of the questions which I have also. Just to give me background, right? I actually grew up in a Hindu family, like in southern part of India. I know about Buddhism, But like initially I thought, okay, Buddha, like I don't know the difference between Hinduism and Buddhism to be true. I thought, okay, Buddha is also same like Hinduism, and like I also have a statue of Buddha in my home in India, and here also I have one. Like, what is the difference between like Buddhism and Hinduism that you see? I just wanted to understand the basics.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm not that familiar with Hinduism. So yeah, I cannot speak for that. But in Buddhism, yeah, so suffering of life is taught very clearly. And so we are very aware of it, and we are very proactive about reducing our suffering in life. So that's a very clear goal. Otherwise, there's really no meaning in living life. If every day is going to be just full of misery and just betrayals or loss, what kind of meaning is there in such a life? Buddha encourages us to hang in there, to fight a good fight, because he's showing us the way to a happiness that does not betray us, that does not abandon us. So that's something that I've learned in Buddhism. Yeah. And I know Hinduism also talks about karma. Yeah. So Buddha utilized the word karma that already existed.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that is my take on that is sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, any one of you, because Hinduism is based on whatever you believe as God, you can believe that and worship, and different paths are there, right? That's why, like I say, like it's a different tradition, different cultures, and for them, like everything is God. And they made, even Arunga mentioned, like he has a Buddha statue and they worship Buddha also as a god. And for them, like they don't have problem with any religion, everything is God, in the sense you and me are God. So which again, Buddha doesn't talk about God at all, right? So he is, my understanding was he was against the concept of God. So is that right? We can say it in that way, or?
There are some gods in Buddhism too.
So was it diluted or corrupted by Hindus, or how did it happen?
Yeah, I forgot the name. Yeah, Mara, maybe he is one of the gods, and also I forgot. I cannot remember Sanskrit word very well. So there are many gods in Buddhism. And those gods are kind of protecting the Buddhists, such gods. So Buddha taught there are many beings who have achieved high level of enlightenment. And God and bodhisattvas, like, there are many bodhisattvas too. They achieved a higher level of enlightenment. They are not human beings. They have deeper spiritual awakening. So Buddha didn't deny such existence. And actually, we are protected by these gods and bodhisattvas.
Okay, so that is something like I need to research, and I have a different opinion. Sorry, like I'm not disagreeing, and so I appreciate all the effort you put in. But my final question to you both is like, how is your work going to create an impact in the community, like, or in bringing in people together and finding that middle path? I know like you are active, and I wish like I could join more regularly in the Dallas Buddhism community or Austin Buddhism community. And I came to know that like you are based in Pacific time zone. Thank you for that as well. Hopefully like just enlighten us, like how does your work is creating an impact?
First, I will answer your question, and maybe next, Bita. Yeah, before the pandemic, we were just having in-person meeting at the coffee houses in many parts of Los Angeles. And now the pandemic, we started the online meeting. So in a sense, we are creating online community. In Buddhism, a community of Buddhist learners is called Sangha. S-A-N-G-H-A, Sangha. Buddha said Sangha is very important because when we learn Buddhism and go forward on our spiritual journey, it requires a lot of effort and patience, but we have weak mindset. We cannot continue if we are all alone. So people need to help each other, inspire each other. That's why Sangha is important. So when we want to achieve spiritual awakening, yeah, this Sangha is going to be a good condition. And not only that, when we share happiness, happiness will increase. Happiness is the only thing that multiplies by division, they say. The more we share our happiness will grow and people become happier too. So this is the ideal circumstance for any community. So our purpose is to let people, to guide people to happiness, and those people who also enable their neighbors and beloved ones and co-workers all achieve true happiness. So in this way, happiness will increase on this earth, and we don't engage in politics so much. We work out on our heart, and then we want to achieve real peace of mind in our own community.
Oh yeah, that's beautifully expressed. So yeah, exactly what I had in my mind too.
Wonderful. Like I love that. So we all strive to be like, even in the constitution, they mentioned that like the beauty of this country is like the pursuit of happiness, and we all long for that. And when we share it, like, and it grows in multifold. And thank you for that. And I want to wholeheartedly thank you both for coming to our show and sharing your virtue and wisdom. And it was wonderful. Like I wanted to talk more, but I want to be mindful of your time and commitment. I don't want like to spoil your evening. And if you have any final thoughts, please, any quote you want to mention that for our viewers.
So thank you very much for having us here. It's always great to see you in our meetups, JK, and yeah, let's do our best to work. So giving hope to people from all walks of life everywhere. Happiness or joyfulness is possible if we keep up the good work of doing soul searching, going within for answers. And yeah, let's just go forward together, carrying this torch of light and wisdom together. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thank you once again. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too.
You too.
Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise.